Welcome to Zoom In Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I'm your host, Ting Ye. Taiwan is known for vibrant democracy and free expression, but when it comes to the arts, especially pop music, the picture can be more complicated. A small home market makes it difficult for artists to make a living. Over the past 2 decades, many local pop stars have pivoted their career to a larger neighboring market of China, a move often seen as a pivotal for rising talents. That raises crucial questions. What do artists have to trade to keep doors open? And what happens if they choose not to? Today, we're joined by Dr. Chen-Yu Lin. She's now teaching at Cardiff University, and we're going to talk about where creative freedom really lies in Taiwan's pop and indie scenes. Welcome to our show, Chen-Yu.
Thank you so much, Ting. It's a pleasure to be joining you here.
You've launched a new documentary, The Silent Sunrise. So can you talk about what this documentary is about and share it with our audience?
The documentary unpacks the stories of how contemporary Taiwanese musicians, when it comes to facing the Chinese markets, that they have to make day-to-day decisions about from how they present themselves all the way to if they are touring there or not, and if they can say certain things or not. So I also look at the censorship landscape through the story of a song called Island Sunrise, which is an anthem, I think, to many protesters back in 2014 during Sunflower Movement. So we got to interview the band who wrote the song and the singer-songwriter of the band, Sam Young, and also all the other band members in Fire X. We also got to interview many musicians and industry workers in Taiwan, which express different kind of views and experiences. And to me, I think what is really fascinating is that we also got to interview musicians who are anonymous, of course, sharing their experiences entering into the Chinese market and to an extent the negotiation and the compromise that they had to make.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of a sad thing about Taiwan's tiny scale, because our market is relatively small comparing to the other countries in other parts of the world. That means that we need to find a way for our artists to make a living. And sometimes it's difficult for us to decide how to see their decisions. I remember that you mentioned how when an agent for the musicians, that they are going to plan their future career for the bands or for the artist, they have to ask them a very crucial question. And can you share that with us?
Sure, of course. So when, for example, an emerging Taiwanese band or act, as Ting said, that faced the decision of touring in China or not, or especially I think physically going there, would usually take a lot more logistics and basically administration. And once that process happens, that there will be a lot of different kind of tasks that they have to do. And it is very common. It is required for them to apply for approval to be playing music in different cities in China. So it is a complicated process because actually that needs to be approved by different cities. So they usually have a local collaborator, or sometimes we call them fixers or touring manager, to be very hands-on in those processes to ensure that the musician's application will be approved. So in that process, that they would ask them to, for example, remove certain more controversial content on their social media platforms, including supporting Hong Kong, Taiwan, and also same-sex marriage, for example.
But there are certain things that if you don't say, you will have some problem there. And that's another thing that really worries us, because we do believe that free expression also includes the right to not say the things that you don't truly believe in. And what is this like right now in Taiwan's pop scene?
I think it's definitely becoming more and more intense, and a lot of the artists, and I think it's not just the artists or singers, stars themselves, but also industry workers. that work more behind the scene. For example, producers and then also session players that tour a lot in China, for example, that the need to express certain type of national identities. We very much often see clauses in the contract that restrict the artists themselves to express political views. And if they do, that brings commercial losses to either the tour or the television networks or the producers, for example, that they would actually be fined. So most of the time it's bounded by contract as part of the business deal that they simply should not express political views.
Why does Taiwanese artists still kind of like to go? Like some of them like to go, and I believe that maybe there's a lot of like attractions from China, but what are some of the factors in Taiwan that actually push them over?
So I think this is two-layered. So the first layer that I think we already discussed and touched on, which is how the industry infrastructure has already been in place for musicians in Taiwan to develop the career in China. Why we don't have such infrastructure yet for musicians to develop their career in, for example, Southeast Asian market. Not to even mention, I think, the far away markets, the US or Europe, for example. Musicians have to try really, really hard to find opportunities to develop career in those other markets. Why for China is usually easier because there are already collaborators out there which they can easily connect to, and it's easy to tour there, and also there are usually more invitations from there. And it's also a lucrative market because musicians usually said that a gig booked in China would pay more than one in Taiwan, and not to mention that there might be more cities there. So, but I don't think that it's necessarily just about the profit. I also see that it's natural for musicians to want to connect with their audiences. So if musicians know that their music is listened to and liked and embraced by audience in China, sometimes they will also be more willing to actually connect with them or engage with them in person. So I think it's not just about profit, even though I think one very important layer might be that. Especially, I think that it could be challenging for musicians sometimes, especially the ones just starting out, to be able to make both ends meet or to be able to have a comfortable life starting out in Taiwan, and if they only develop their career in Taiwan, because the market size is relatively smaller.
Yeah, since it might kind of be impossible for us to change the fact that we have a smaller market, I think we do have some part that we can try to address to make our industry more mature, that kind of build up the complete industry chain to help the artists to maybe tour in other countries instead of China. And also the government's position, like what do you think the role that government played in Taiwan's music industry?
Yeah, I definitely think the government and policymakers have a role to play in bringing Taiwanese music to the international markets, especially the ones outside of China. And I think they already have been quite active, doing different kind of things, providing funding, and then also bringing Taiwanese musicians to international showcase, including South by Southwest in the US, and also Glastonbury earlier on, and Liverpool Sound City Music Festival even earlier. The infrastructure to export Taiwan's music to international market outside of China is not yet in place. So I think to be able to obtain professional network and to develop distribution network, and also to be able to find platforms that enable Taiwanese musicians to share their music with international audience would be something that is really crucial. And this has to be not just a one-off opportunity or a one-off project, because individual projects would be able to give musicians certain exposure. but that might not be able to be sustainable.
I think both of us agree that creative freedom is very important. But for some of them, some of those might think that comparing to the other topics that's more urgent, some of the issues that's more dangerous, creative freedom isn't that necessary to be focused on. What's your take on that?
I think this is an excellent question, because it's true, as musicians or creators or authors, whoever that I think that create things or say things or express their views through different means, that some of us do feel that whatever that we create actually don't violate against the regulations or the rules. It's just naturally align with whatever regulations that is imposed on us, especially if we live in the liberal democracies. But I would say, I think creative freedom is something that would allow arts to become a space for different kind of dialogue and negotiations. I think art should be the first place where many difficult questions are raised, whether it is about human rights, whether it is about societal issues or political powers, for example. That should be an open space, I think, for questions to be voiced. That should be a space that allows questions to be raised. And so that I think as a society, the listeners and the artists have space to further on empathize or even envision change. So I think creative freedom and artistic freedom, for me, it's not a luxury. It should be a foundation.
And my last question is, since you have diverse background, you've been teaching in Taiwan before and now teaching in UK, and so you definitely have a lot of opportunity to have some exchange with the global audience. What are the most common misunderstanding or questions that you get from maybe the screening of your film or during your classes?
Because I work in Cardiff, Wales, and back in the days I used to spend a long time working and studying in Liverpool in England. So they're both in the United Kingdom. And to be completely honest, that students studying journalism, media and culture or music there, most of them are from the UK or from Europe. And of course, there are some international students too. So I wouldn't call it misconceptions, but I think what they know about Taiwan's music is really limited, no matter how much I think they're interested and intrigued to learn more. And yeah, I would say that there is just not a lot that they know about Taiwanese music. Although I think there were a few acts, I think some of the students would to some of the students that will ring a bell, including metal band Tonic, which has been, I think, very much influential internationally, especially in metal music world. And yeah, and some of the students have heard of Sunset Roller Coasters because I think they have been really successful touring with the world internationally, and they have a few sold-out gigs in the UK too.
It's such a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and very happy to finally have you in our show in person.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. If you enjoyed our episode today, please leave a comment, share, like, or subscribe. Hope you enjoy the show. Until next time.